I'll now call this regular monthly meeting to order on August 18th, 2022 at 7:03 p.m. If you could all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd now like to invite our speakers for public forum to join us. As a reminder, comments are limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you please refrain from sharing any identifiable employee information in your comments. Chris, who do we have joining us first?
Amber, our first guest should be Donald Miller.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller.
I do not see Mr. Miller with us.
If you'd like to move to the second guest, it is Sarah Wolf.
I do see Sarah. Sarah, I'll bring you in.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can see me, but I'll go ahead and start. Board of Education and any other faculty, thank you so much for your time and dedication to this community and its students. My husband and I, who is not here right now, appreciate and acknowledge the difficulty and the decisions that you have had to make, especially since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are writing today as parents of a 3rd grade student and a 2nd grade student. We are very pleased to see that the MRH administration and board adopted a position consistent with the CDC guidelines and moved to a mask recommended state upon return to school. We just really thank you for being willing to shift gears. We are also coming to you today because we believe that the threshold for masking should be lifted, if not abolished altogether. We're curious if the district threshold is remaining at 1% of each building's population. We are unaware of any district with as restrictive of a threshold as MRH, and we implore you to review the district's threshold in comparison to some of the other much larger districts who last year were able to maintain a mask recommended or mask optional state for most of the school year. The Webster Grove School District no longer has a threshold for returning to masks. The Parkway School District no longer has a threshold for returning to masks. The Kirkwood School District no longer has a threshold for returning to masks. The Melville School District no longer has a threshold for returning to masks, though it does state that, quote, parents and guardians will be notified of positive cases over the course of any week exceeds 1.5% of the school's population, end quote. The St. Louis parochial schools, Brentwood, Clayton, Rockwood, St. Louis Public Schools, Special School District, et cetera. The list continues. If MRH continues with the 1% masking threshold, it will only perpetuate inconsistency. And I think that we can all agree that our children have had to persevere through their share of changes and challenges in the last 2.5 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Wolf. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Do we have Mr. Miller with us?
I do see Mr. Miller. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I do have a question. First, I'd like to make a statement. Teachers, administrators, caregivers, and parents have had significant challenges over the past few years since COVID became part of our daily lives. Those of us who have children with learning disorders or who just don't do well with remote learning have had to learn to adjust and pivot during this period. This has created conflict and divisiveness in this community, which continues even today, especially in light of the current decision to adhere to CDC guidelines and start the school year mask optional rather than mandatory. I follow the science. I and my entire family are fully vaxxed and boosted. We all still got COVID, even though we masked religiously. Many others have had the same experience. I would like to know how the infection rate threshold is decided upon, specifically what science or medical guidelines are being followed. My understanding, and I think the previous speaker alluded to this, is that MRH has the lowest threshold in all of Missouri public schools, with a school district as small as ours compared to others. This creates a lot of confusion and frustration for many. I strongly believe that when our district and our board says they are listening to everyone and taking into account all of the repercussions of these decisions, that they mean that and that all of MRH is truly being represented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We appreciate you providing comment tonight. If we have no other speakers, we will move on to item 2.01. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Rachel.
Second.
Thank you, Katie. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 3.01, construction change orders with Chris.
Sure, this is change order number 20, I believe. It's related to excavation of some of those soils that we've experienced in the past, some repair to some ceiling grids, premium time for some plumbing to get things ready for the start of the school year, some additional floor boxes in the media center. All of the details are there in the attachment, so I won't read them all to you. These are needed changes as we move forward through the project. The total budgetary impact on this particular change order is $44,430.39. Any questions?
Thank you, Chris, for staying on top of this. I just want to remind the community that this is not extra funds, that you're pulling this from contingency funds already allotted. Correct?
Yes, yes, from our bond proceeds.
Yeah. Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you, Chris. Now moving on to item 3.02, COVID-19 mitigation measures with Dr. Jameson. Dr. Jameson, you're still on mute.
You would have thought I would have learned by now. Good evening, board, community. I do have the pleasure of giving our update and direction for the return to learn for our welcome of students on August 23rd, which I'm really excited about. As I always start, we are still in a pandemic, and I recognize that our community is seeking greatly to transition to some normalcy, and my administrative team are working to provide as many opportunities as possible. So just to jump straight in, what you see here is the tracking data for St. Louis County around COVID inpatient bed utilization, hospitalizations, and cases per 100,000, as well as the community status levels. This information was actually pulled last week from August 12th. What I will say is what's not reflected here is the August 17th data, which shows that for St. Louis County that there are currently 0 cases for the 7-day rolling average, and this could be quite misleading for our community. In conversations with Dr. Newland, as well as Nabu Colancherry from St. Louis County Department of Health, what was shared is that the information has not yet been updated. So I wanted to make sure that I put that information in the space so that we are not thinking that the data has actually declined to a place where we have not had any cases. What I do also want to point out, and we'll talk a little bit about as we transition through with some of the changes recommended by the CDC, is we are not just solely looking at positivity levels, and we'll talk more about that as we transition through. Really, the idea is to actually look at hospitalizations. And so I talk frequently with Dr. Newland. I meet weekly with the COVID-19 task force. And part of that conversation is not only solely looking at positivity levels, but the hospital admissions per 100,000. So again, this data is from last week that was pulled, but what was shared by Dr. Newland is that ideally we want to see daily hospitalization rates at about 40 per day. Now, this information is not reported through St. Louis County or the CDC for us. But currently, what we're seeing based on the information that I received is about 15 to 16 hospitalizations per day, which is actually much lower than our low positivity rate times when we were experiencing about 60 hospitalizations per day. And the data here currently reflects from last week that the community status level was at median, and I'll talk about that shortly. I always think it's important to look at a couple pieces when we get to this point. This data actually comes from the Missouri Department of Health, and what it reflects for us is the community level, as well as the number of COVID cases across the week, and then the transition and the change. And so I always like to go back and look at the data before each and every board meeting, because the information is pulled prior to. So last week, the actual community level was at medium. And when I pulled the data this afternoon, the current community level is actually high and the transmission level is high. And so in my conversation with Dr. Newland, I was specific to ask questions about how that information aligns with current CDC data, and then how that actually works with our local data. And I'll share a little bit about that. In the transition, like I said, we're currently at a high level, but also the community level for the last 7 days, the rate is at 176.9. What I will note is that high levels alone do not dictate masking, but there are other data that should be used as we move forward with that. I did pull some additional data that's not reflected here, which basically shows that the case rate is the highest amongst our population of individuals who are 70 years or older. The case rates per 100,000 for our students who are 9 and younger is 17 per 17-day case rate. And then for 10 to 19-year-olds, it's a 10-day case rate per 100,000. So you can see that the numbers are lower for school-age students, which is a data point that I want to put into the space for us to hold on to for future conversation. I always think it's important that we look at our specific zip codes. And so while I recognize the numbers in St. Louis County may reflect high, it's also important for us to look at our case rates for each zip code for the past 7 days. Again, this data came from last week. I will tell you that there is always a discrepancy between the two zip codes for 63117 and 63143. So here from last week, the case rate for the past 7 days was 33.9%. As of today, it's 59.2%. And the case count for the past 7 days has increased to 28. For 63117, we continue to see a decline. And the case rate for the past 7 days has not changed, but the case rate, the case count has decreased to 21. So our St. Louis County vaccination reporting, and the reason why I continue to keep this particular slide in the presentation is because it is a point that the CDC continues to highlight as a way to ensure that in-person learning can continue and that there is not a huge impact on our medical facilities, as well as schools having to close. And so what I did not include on this particular slide, because of the summer break, where we are as a district with our vaccinations, if we're saying the initial vaccination and not necessarily inclusion of the booster. So we have requested staff who have been boosted to share that information with the Human Resources Department at the upcoming board meeting. An update regarding those numbers will be shared. Currently, our staff vaccination rates are at 94%, and it is really probably one of the highest amongst the counties in my conversation with St. Louis County Department of Health. And our student rate is 75.9%. And when we look at our numbers across the campuses, high school is 81%, middle school 84%, elementary 73%. And of the school age students who were eligible for vaccination at the conclusion of the school year, the ECC was at 68%. So we are bolstering a vaccination rate higher than what's reflected for St. Louis County. So this is the piece that I want to spend a lot of time talking about. I will tell you that I do not regret my initial recommendation for masking for the first 2 weeks, because the rationale behind that was to level set, to ensure that we weren't allowing asymptomatic student staff coming into the space where transmission would occur, which would then either impact staffing. We recognize that there's a shortage with subs, even though MRH has a successful fill rate. If we continue to put the strain on the system, we very well could have subs or not have individuals in the classrooms with students. And we know the impact that has on success of students academically and also from a social emotional standpoint. So some of the things that the CDC highlighted in their update, the idea of cohorting has been removed and then changed to recommendations for screening. And so last year, if you recall, when we had events around theater and some of those pieces, sporting events for basketball players, we were actually working with NAMI to provide screening testing for those individuals. Now, while the CDC says that we no longer have to do that, they do recommend when the community level is high that at key points we can actually conduct testing. So some of the time frames that they included would include holidays, spring break, and any contact sports or band concerts and things of that nature. So I do want to share that because I don't want our community to think that because we are transitioning based on the CDC's recommendation that screening should not occur. And with the partnership with the St. Louis County Department of Health, we were provided at-home testing kits to provide to our staff and our community if they request them. The next piece was removing the recommendation to quarantine except in high-risk congregated spaces and what that looks like. And so with the quarantine, if, for example, a staff member or student they know or are suspected to be exposed, they still are required to mask for 10 days. What has changed is that the requirement for those individuals to receive a negative test before they return or to have to require them to continue to mask if a positive test occurs. And then also information around test to stay. That's a huge piece. And I will also say that that's a piece that from Misha, when we begin to talk about sporting events, they have allowed local education agencies to set their own expectations around sports. And then the last piece is information around wearing masks and how we manage that across the board. And so masking, of course, is not recommended for individuals 2 and under, and you'll see some of the recommendations based on the information from the CDC. So I just want to remind us where we were. So the board for summer school made some adjustments in our current mitigation measures due to summer school and the space and some of the opportunities that were available to ensure that we can move forward. You will find here we use the language suspend instead of completely removing because we still are in a pandemic. We may find that increases in positive cases, transmission within schools, and we may have to reinstitute some of these items if necessary. So I thought that this was a prudent direction so that we can quickly pivot if we need to ensure that our community is safe. So what are we recommending as we return to school? So continuing to suspend vaccination boosting or weekly testing requirements. I will say that Mr. Estrada is working to schedule a vaccination clinic. We want to continue to partner with our communities to offer that opportunity for our families. Suspending mask mandate requirements and transitioning to mask recommended, which we have done during summer school, starting with the first day of school, which is August 23rd, and then looking at our PK-12 population, again, closely monitoring positivity rates and the additional data and science that we're watching to make decisions. So we did make an adjustment for the positivity rate. So previously, the positivity rate was identified at 1%. And to be completely honest, the aim was to ensure that school doors can remain open and that in-person learning occurs. That is the priority for the board and also the priority from district administration. So we did run calculations on a 1.5% threshold and the rationale for actually doing that. And so while I recognize that a 1% threshold is low and 1.5% threshold is low in comparison to some of our other districts, I know the challenge it creates if we have to close a classroom, if we don't have coverage in a classroom, if we have to transition particularly to a virtual option, if we find that our positivity rates within our schools go beyond a particular point. So the aim for creating a threshold is to ensure that in-person learning can continue. And that was the conversation that I had with Dr. Newland as we talked through, well, how did districts get to that point? But I will also say that political terrain justifies removal and continuing with certain mitigation measures. And so I feel very comfortable with the 1.5% based on our current enrollment. And so if we're looking at where our buildings are, please keep in mind that the middle and high school we group together because it is one campus. With staff and students at the ECC, we have approximately 575 staff members. We have a threshold set at 9%. So with transitioning back to how we provided lunch, especially excited through Chartwells and thinking about the removal of plexi, a 1.5% threshold would give us 9 students to have a positivity rate within the school. And keep in mind, the threshold is by building, it is not by district. So last year, the middle and high school did a great job and did not have to remass as frequently as our ECC as well as our elementary school. MRHE, the total persons in the building with students and staff are 495. That threshold is 8. And then for the high school and middle school with 730 persons, it's about 11. Those numbers are flexible. We are still enrolling students. We are still finding students transitioning in. And so an update regarding what that looks like from an enrollment standpoint will be provided to the board next month as we give our update. But I also felt it was important to share publicly that we have had active cases between the month of July and to current date. And so we've had approximately 13 positive cases, and the majority of those cases were staff members. And so we want to keep in mind that while we are making the recommendation to go mask recommended, some of those other pieces that we have put in place for mitigation measures, such as initially it was 6 feet, we're looking at 3 feet, continuing to encourage frequent hand washing and hand sanitizer use and good hygiene, and then also ensuring that we're cleaning the building consistently. And then the last piece is to suspend visitation of non-essential visitors. And so I had a long conversation with Dr. Newland about this particular piece, as well as posing the questions with some of my colleagues. If we have those in-person events for those individuals who choose to mask and not, and ensuring that those opportunities are provided to our families. So these are the recommendations that we are making for the onset of the school year for the district. At this time, I welcome any questions you may have.
I have a few. As far as the positivity rate and how we calculate that by building, I have, I think, again, this is a very nuanced situation. And I know that we have done extensive work around contact tracing in ways that other districts are not doing. Thank you again, Vince, and all of the district nurses for that work. I have heard some concern that folks are saying when they've kept their children home for an exposure, that they believe that that child is not tested positive, but is being proactively quarantined by a family, that child is being counted as part of our positivity rate. And so I kept my 2 kids home, so there's already 2 kids that is going to put the ECC over its number. Can you clarify that for me?
Vince, can you jump in on that one?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Katie. So parents and family members who choose to keep students home due to exposure are not counted. We only count positive tests. And you also raised the biggest challenge we've had since Omicron variant and its latest variant is the transmission rates really high in homes and households. So some family members have made those choices to keep folks home and wait for test results. But we only count, we're really careful about that. We only count on positivity rates. We know that threshold has to be managed very carefully. Positive test only. Not people staying home to be cautious or wait, or even waiting test results.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
As far as the, the mask recommended move here, I know we've also learned quite a bit as a country about the quality of masks that should be used for, the highest level of protection. I recall that the district purchased a number of child-sized masks at one point in the pandemic. If there are families that would like their children to continue to mask, is it possible for them to get, to upgrade from, the cloth masks that might be kind of ratty at this point, or, just not as strong as, the disposable masks, or even, I don't know if we have KN95s for children in the district either.
We did have some KN95s, but we also do have medical grade masks, and we have a supply both in adult sizes and youth sizes. Yeah. And they'll be available to school for sure. Any student that wants some, staff will always have them available.
Great, appreciate that, that service. We don't need to be stockpiling them for a rainy day, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
I do have a couple of questions that are maybe more services and curriculum related. Have heard some concern from families, and I think perhaps this is driving some of the concern about positivity rate level setting for returning to masks, about concern for how masks may be impacting their children's either social emotional development or particular special education needs, whether that is speech or other facial expression sort of learning. I imagine we've learned quite a bit about educating kids while wearing masks over the last 2 years, and just wondering if there are particular strategies that are being implemented broadly, or if there are more targeted strategies that families may consider requesting should we have to return to masking because of high spikes in the district.
So I can start with that one. So from a services standpoint, which is one of the areas highlighted in the CDC's new recommendations, particularly for students with disabilities, Ben Gleason has been very flexible with identifying additional options for those families. And then we've also, just to remind the community, added additional support this year at the expense of special school district. Great partners, thank you. So we do have additional staff members to support with that. And then from a social emotional standpoint, we have continued to talk about the need to support students differently. And so we do have multi-tiered systems of support coordinator that's been added to the district, and then also the board approved the use of second steps, and that's pre-K 8 to provide support from a social emotional standpoint. And then the board also approved, particularly at the ECC, an additional counselor to provide support. And we also still have our SEL teachers in place. And so we're being very intentional about what that support looks like. We do understand the impact and the need to move to normalcy, but we also want to ensure that we keep our community safe. If you heard earlier, I talked about the age range that is being impacted most by COVID tests. The piece for that is we have students who are going home with family members who are immune compromised. And so we want to be cautious in decision making to ensure that we're keeping our community safe. But I feel confident based on where we are. One of the things that I will say is that the decision tree that the task force created will also help nurses in their decision making around sending students home. And the task force has said that we can take those at-home tests as well. And so remember, last year we weren't doing that. So I think that that will be beneficial to ensure that we're keeping students in school.
Dr. Jamieson, can you elaborate on that a little bit more for our families watching tonight about what tests will be allowed and about what quarantine requirements will be in place?
Sure. So right now the CDC is saying that we don't have to quarantine. You have to mask for 10 days if you know or have had known or suspected exposure. And so those 10 days, you still are able to come to school. You can wear a mask. But as it relates to for quarantining and then for testing, they still are taking tests that are provided through, say, CDC, Walgreens, but they are taking the antigen tests that we sent out, I believe, information that you can order and the government is providing. And then the district also has antigen at-home tests that we can provide to our families as well. So we're really being flexible. The aim is to ensure that we can continue with in-person learning, but to continue to support our families. And so I just want to be clear. I too am a parent and I get it. Just had this conversation with my son, around masking and the decision to do such. But we have to keep in mind that while surrounding districts may or may not be shedding some of the mitigation measures that they have, my responsibility is not to those districts. My responsibility is to our families and community in Maplewood and Richmond Heights.
So a quick follow-up on that. Thank you, Katie and Amber, for those questions. And I think I want to make sure people are hearing too, that we want those supports in place, whether or not the whole district is masking, because we know there will be people who are masking all the time because they either they're at high risk for severe illness or their family members are. So we need those supports in place at all times. The one other thing I just wanted to make sure people heard is that, the fact that the community level is medium now on the CDC website, it says 0 cases in St. Louis County. It was high, it was high and then it went to medium, and we have to ask, is that data correct? Are we really at medium?
So what
0 today?
So what I will tell you is that was one of my follow-up conversations with Dr. Newland. I also talked to Nabu Kalancherry, who will be joining us to give an update around monkeypox. What was shared with me is that the website has not yet been updated. And so when I was going through, I thought it was critical to share that because the false assumption could be made that we're in a space where the data is not being reflected as it really should be. And so in the next board update, I will provide additional information, but I was not given a firm time frame of when that information would actually be updated, but I did inquire.
Right, thank you. And I think, like you're saying, if we can't trust the case data, we can't trust the admissions data. And the admissions data is not down, a fourth of the level that it was in the previous month. It's not down to 0. So we know that there's transmission happening in our community. Everyone who can mask should be masking inside and outside of school in order to keep our students in school and our teachers safe.
Any more questions for Dr. Jamieson before we move on? All right, well, I will note that Dr. Jamieson, I appreciate you placing this conversation in the context of the fragility of our staffing situation in the district right now, particularly around our support staff. So with that, we will move on to item 3.03, support staff salary increase.
Having all the fun tonight. All right, let's get this. All right, so this item is an important item, and I want to start off with what I am calling our theory of action. And so what you have there is the idea that if we invest in our support staff by increasing the minimum starting pay to a living wage of $15, then MRH will be able to acquire, develop, and sustain staff to fill critical staffing areas. And so, the question that I wrote for myself as I was looking through my slide presentation was, why is this information important? Well, it's important because we've had 25 resignations for our support staff from August of 2021 to June 30th, 2022. And while that does not seem like a very large number, it is in comparison to some of the other positions that we've had. And so when I talk about critical staffing areas, we are talking about clerical staff, custodians, food service, and also some of our maintenance staff. So what's our current reality? I wanted to give a breakdown void of names, but just to list where our staff are, and then I'll share some data regarding surrounding districts and what their starting pay is. And then I thought it was also critical to show what our employment status is for those individuals who fall in those categories. So we have 8 part-time employees who fill varying positions, and we have 14 full-time employees, and of those 22, you see the range of where we are. So we have 2 staff members getting paid as low as $12 an hour, and the highest paid staff member currently in the district for these critical need areas is $14.42. And this also includes some of our Discover Club workers, which, as we saw during the year, and you'll get an update later, those are critical areas to fill, and it was difficult to bring those individuals forward. But I will also say that while increasing the starting salary for this group of individuals, it's not necessarily going to bring additional individuals in to fill those spots. And we saw that when the board approved the rate for bus drivers, and we had, if I can recall, 2 candidates, and then the one that we ended up hiring lasted for maybe 3 hours. So just to give you an idea of where we are, and I do want to also point out that I recognize that with these 22 individuals, we are not taking into consideration the length of time that they have been in the district. And so being very transparent with the board, this increase, while getting everyone to $15 if approved, for a person who's making $14.42, if they've been in the district the longest, and for a person who's currently at $12, it does create inequities. And that's one of the things we're hoping to address and have discussion about later on as we continue our conversations with Dr. Shonda Ambers Phillips. But to give you an idea of where we are, so if we're talking about custodial staff, the pay rate, and you see where we are. UCity currently pays their custodial staff starting pay with no experience, $14.89. Kirkwood, $13.75. And I do want to say that these numbers are based on last year's data. They have since made some adjustments. You have St. Louis Public Schools, $13.39, Webster Groves, $13.10, Clayton, $16.03, and Brentwood, $13.89. And that's just for custodians. Our head custodians, when you think about the disparities, Bayless pays $19.86, Webster Groves, $20.76, UCity, $19.39, Clayton, $28.89, and Brentwood, $19.74. Those are starting salaries. And so I do want to highlight just a range of where after school and before school workers are. The surrounding districts starting wage for that is anywhere between $15 to $19, with some actually offering $20 because of the critical needs shortage. And the same can be said for bus drivers and cook assistants. So we know that these are essential roles within our districts. Without them, we would not be able to do a great deal of that. A reflection of that right now is our high school and middle school that is currently being addressed with our custodial staff. So at this point, we want to be able to think about how they're committed to us and what the commitment is from the district to them. So I wanted to talk about the resignations across the months and give you an idea of what that looks like for us. And so I talked about the number of resignations. You can see how our staff members are resigning. Well, the number of employees coming in to replace those resignations does not mirror the staff that we've lost. And so being creative and thinking outside of the box has opened up opportunities for us to fill some of those critical gaps, but that doesn't mean that the needs are still not there. And so that means that we are actually taxing our current employees to work excessive overtime. And so if we're saying that we are focusing on self-care, how do we reflect that in the actions that we make with our current staff who are most critical at this moment? And so I want to talk about the budget impact so we can get an idea of what this looks like. So currently we've already allocated plus or minus with benefits and the current rate for 17.3 FTEs. And so you can see that the 17.3 FTEs are currently what we have. It does not include current positions that we will be bringing in and that the board potentially will be approving tonight. So that would make an adjustment for that. And so if the board accepts the recommendation for the $15 an hour, the impact there would then transition the amount that we're paying out in year one to $401,000, which is a difference of approximately $80,000. And then pending continual increases across the year, you can see the growth if we're looking at a 3% increase each year. So what's the recommendation? I want to be clear that when we are able to acquire, develop, sustain, and evaluate our support staff in a way where we are building their capacity and they feel that they are valued members of our community, we are able to continue to build individuals who feel like they have a sense of belonging but are dedicated to MRH. And we see that currently in our current cohort of support staff members who have chosen to stay despite where their current wages are. So the recommendation that will be coming back to the board for action later in the meeting is to approve an increase of support staff starting wage to $15 for those who are impacted. I do want to highlight that our clerical staff currently all make more than $15 an hour, so they are not in this pool for the current recommendation. That concludes the presentation for this particular item. At this time, I welcome any questions you may have.
I have a few again. I appreciate the consideration for a living wage for individuals working in our district. And I think that's really in alignment with the values of this board and this community. I see the rationale is simple, and it is moving everyone who is not yet at $15 an hour to $15 an hour. Was there any consideration, or will there be any consideration to move the lowest paid person to $15 an hour and kind of scale all the other salaries? I don't know what the budget impact of that would be, or if that was crunched for us.
So I would ask that we have the ability to run those numbers, and I can provide it in the next board update. We did talk about the inequities, which I kind of pointed out for where people are and their years of service in the district, but recognizing the critical need right now. We have several topics, not only on the docket for CBTF, but also for support staff. Those all include one, being transparent with our salary schedule and how we get to that point. And then honestly, we don't have a salary schedule for support staff, and then being able to show what those increases look like over time. And so I do not have a response for you at this time, but I would ask to be able to bring that information back to update the board publicly at our next board meeting.
Yeah, Bonita, I appreciate that. With that, we are accustomed to seeing those projections for just not 1 year, but maybe over the next 3 years, and and we know there's a lot of unknowns and variables within that. But if we could look at it potentially over a 3-year time span, that would be most helpful for me to be able to look at.
Perfect. And Chris actually, thank you for that, Maria. Chris actually ran it for me for this item. So I'll make sure when we look at the scaffold, we include the 3-year projection as well.
Maybe another related request. Can you speak to, I saw some of the people full-time and some people part-time, but then benefits and salary were kind of lumped together. Is there a difference in benefits between full and part-time that's been considered in that projection?
Chris, did you want to respond to that one?
Yes, there's a significant difference. Full-time employees receive the medical benefits, medical and dental benefits, and those that are part-time do not. Depending on your FTE, you'll also receive retirement benefits. So anything 20 hours, over 20 hours, you'll receive those retirement benefits as well, which is 6.86% of their their gross. So yeah, those are scaled in, and we'll continue to scale those in as we do these additional projections for you.
I just want to make sure that Dr. Jamison, that I'm tracking this correctly. So this was really bringing people to a living wage, which I fully support, but also then we're sort of putting this onto the CBTF to talk about what the support staff and the clerical salary schedule is going to be, to then help decrease any inequities of, then we will have something similar to the teachers, where this is your starting salary that's going to be a living wage, and then how you progress the more years you stay, sort of like we do with the teachers.
That's correct. And one of the things that I got from the last support staff meeting was questions around what criteria is used to determine where you start, and then how is that calculated over time. And so we have been listening, and exactly what you just stated, Rachel, that is the goal, to be able to right size some of that and have something that can be forward facing for those individuals who currently feel as if there is no transparency in where their current salaries are.
So Dr. Jamison, you're saying that we don't currently have a salary schedule for hourly employees?
We do not.
Okay. I want to think a little bit about retention and morale as we go through this process. And I do wonder, knowing that CBTF only meets monthly, what kind of struggles we might be undertaking. I understand we have an emergency need to raise starting salary to $15 an hour because of our vacancies and because our intense need to fill those with qualified candidates. That being said, as you've noted, we created an equity with those who are currently employed. Is there an opportunity for us to accelerate those conversations and that analysis to reduce the amount of time between making this adjustment and proposing and adopting that adjustment? I think it's critical for us to really use an equity lens when we're evaluating this, and ensuring that we're not creating compression in our salary schedule by raising some, and not then subsequently recognizing the loyalty and service of those who are over $15 an hour. So I think I would prefer for these things to happen together, but I understand the urgency. So I would ask that we look at a way to really expedite that analysis and that decision-making around the impact to those who are already over 15.
And that is one of the items. So with each of our new hires, from my listening and learning, I met with them and talked about the items that came out. And so those items have been shared with Dr. Ambrose Phillips in regards to a salary analysis for both of those groups. And when we have our first meeting, at that time, I can make the request for us to increase the frequency of meeting and give the rationale for that. And then also give a little bit of homework to talk about compression so that people understand what that is and how it impacts, as you've indicated, those individuals who have been here a lot longer. And so I struggle with this. I'm going to be completely honest, because we have had staff members here for quite a bit. But again, we will not be able to fill vacancies. We have people who have turned down, particularly for Discover Club positions, because of what the pay rate was. And so as shared before, it will help us maintain the people that we have, but we still have work to do. And I'm committed to doing that with Dr. Chandra Ambrose Phillips and the rest of my team.
Thank you. And I do have one last question. I'm hoping you can help contextualize for us what we're really looking at in those resignation numbers, because it's my understanding that we are not unique as a district in that circumstance of losing so many staff members this year in those areas.
Absolutely. And you see the impact of that in St. Louis Public, and they're suspending transportation. And that was actually a challenge for us at the onset of the school year. And what I'm not reflecting here is still the challenge we're having with hiring bus drivers. So I was gonna go back and look at that. for those. And the resignations that we got from those staff members, either they took full-time employment was the rationale given, and then also just the wage itself. And so it is not uncommon. You have surrounding districts, and I meet with superintendents weekly who have talked about their inability to actually fill those positions. And that's the same, that's it for us. And so people are looking to be able to provide for their families. And at this time, we are unable to do that. And that's really where we're seeing some of the transitions happen.
Any more questions before we move on? All right. Item 3.04, Kelly Services clerical salary increase. With you, Dr. Ambers Phillips.
Good evening, board. I am here to propose that we approve for the 22-23 school year Kelly Services increase to $12 an hour as it's presented. The background here is Maplewood Richmond Heights basically voted in February of 2015 to accept a contract with Kelly Services to manage our district subs. And so that contract is continuous until either party gives a 30-day notice of discontinuance. The recent contract was approved in November of 2021, and it's based on the favorable results that we've had with them. And so that is attached. Currently, the Missouri minimum wage is moving to $12 an hour in January of 2021. And our clerical substitute rate through Kelly Services is $11.30 an hour. So we are proposing changing our rates at the beginning of the school year to meet the Missouri minimum wage that will be required in January. Because of the competitive landscape for subs in the region, we're proposing this rate change increase for the 22-23 school year because it is beneficial for our district. Giving you some historical perspective, I asked Kelly Services to pull some of this information from us for the 2019-20 school year. There were 90 positions that were filled using this clerical subs at $8 hours a day. They worked 720 hours of total work time, and the charge, when you consider the 35% fee that we pay for each substitute used, was about $10,987.20. With this new rate, that would be $16.20 an hour from an increase of $15.26. And so the sum would be $11,664. And there's a difference of about $676.80. For the 2021 school year, that was a virtual year, and so there's no data at that point in time. But if I look at last year from the 21-22 school year, the difference would have been $917.44. And so again, there's no compete clause with Kelly Services if some individuals decide to come over to the Maplewood Richmond Heights side. But for the most part, we believe that approving this salary increase for clerical staff is necessary, given the fact that it will raise in January to the minimum of $12 an hour. Are there any questions you have for me at this time?
This might be similar to the other conversation we were having, but this in the attachment that you're sharing with us, only one of the pay rates I see here is below $12 an hour. So that means that's the only one that goes up. Any thought for the competitiveness of the others, especially given the $15 an hour that we're paying people who actually come work for us full-time and part-time?
No, I think that is the only rate that does go up. For the most part, we do have a fill rate, a high fill rate for our Kelly Services subs. And so I think that we will be okay in terms of keeping the additional rates as they are. Again, it's just making sure that the Missouri minimum, that we raise that, because that is going to be required in January additionally anyway, when we look in the January 2023 school year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Dr. Ambers Phillips. Now we'll move on to administrative communications. We have a guest joining us tonight from the St. Louis County Department of Health. We'll have a monkeypox update by Dr. Nebu Collinjury.
And as he enters the space, the rationale for adding this particular item, when we were having some of the elementary school meet the principal, and we started receiving questions from families regarding what the impact would be on the district. And while I have read a great deal, I'd rather bring the expert forward and allow him an opportunity to give an update and then engage with the board with questions that the board may have. So Nabu, I'm going to hand it over to you. And
thank you. Hi, folks. My name is Nebu Kolancherry. I am the Director for Communicable Disease Response for the County Department of Public Health. I would be remiss if I didn't say, the past couple of years have been rather hard with the pandemic, and if there is any silver lining, it's the fact that I get to work with amazing people like Dr. Jameson. She's been a wonderful partner through all of this, and y'all are lucky to have her. So kudos, man. Monkeypox. Let's talk about monkeypox. I think at this time, what I'd like to share with some folks like a school board, for instance, and the parents listening, is that at this time, what folks in that I would consider parents and teachers, school administrators need to know is, what is it? How does it spread? And that's really about it. And the reason for that is, at this time, we believe that the risk to people in a school environment is really low for monkeypox. And I'll get into that. And I would prefer this be much as conversational as possible. So if you need to interrupt me, please do so. So what is monkeypox? Monkeypox is a pretty rare viral illness that was previously endemic to certain regions of the African continent. And since early this year, it spread to Europe and then to the United States, primarily in large urban areas. So the largest outbreaks right now are in New York and Chicago and San Francisco, et cetera. And in St. Louis right now. So as of today, I would say we have under 25 cases, and I'm being intentionally vague because at low numbers, you want to suppress data. So, but that gives you a risk of the number of cases that are in the St. Louis region. It is the symptoms of this disease are usually some sort of like flu, body aches, fever, body aches, fatigue, not fever, and swollen lymph nodes, as well as the sort of characteristic rash that it's known for. So there's lesions or rash or sores that'll happen somewhere on your body. Usually it starts in the face and works its way down, but in this outbreak, kind of all bets are off. It can appear anywhere on your body. Sometimes the stuff before the rash doesn't happen. It just, you appear with a rash. And how it spreads then is it spreads through close contact with someone that has monkeypox. And the most important thing to note is, as evidenced by the discussion of the last hour, our frame of reference for communicable diseases is COVID, right? And this is not COVID. It's not remotely as transmissible as COVID. You need to be in pretty close contact with somebody. And the three main ways of spreading are skin-to-skin contact with someone that has monkeypox, particularly the lesions themselves, sharing bedding or clothing or towels or linens used by someone that is infected. But once laundered, they are safe to use. And then finally, prolonged respiratory exposure. And the minute I say that, I know people are going to get concerned. It truly is prolonged, something like kissing, hugging, sneezing, like, and I should sort of say what the next part of what I'm about to say is pretty unscientific. But the more that we learn about this, it's a lot less transmissible than we're seeing. Than we think. It looks like that not only do the lesions have to make its way onto your body, or the genetic material of the virus from the lesions, it's got to get some way to get inside you. So either through cuts or abrasions on your arms, or in your mouth, etc. I think it's important to know that we both have a vaccine and treatment for this. That's another big important thing to note. Vaccine supply is very limited. So right now we are only vaccinating close contacts of people that test positive for monkeypox, and as of last week, have expanded our pool to get the vaccine to people at high risk. Let's see. I'm going to stop there. Dr. Jameson, is there anything I missed before I opened up the rest of the board for questions?
No, I think that was great. Thank you.
Got it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for your time. Can you speak a little bit more specifically about who's considered high risk?
Yeah. Are there children that are listening in on the call?
That is possible.
So, I need to make sure my language is appropriate then, don't I? So right now it's, how do I say this? It's people that engage in anonymous partners or multiple partners, as well as transactional work with sex. And that's largely due to limited supply of the vaccine, I'm sorry.
So we're used to COVID right now, and we're used to people with autoimmune deficiencies or with cancers or with asthma or with whatever.
Yeah.
That's a different, we're talking a completely different high risk group. Is if I'm hearing correctly.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. I see what you mean. All things being equal, right? If people are, if everybody in a room was exposed the exact same way, those that are immunocompromised, those that are pregnant, are more likely to contract monkeypox. So that still remains the case, right? Because that's an immune system thing. But right now, based on what we're seeing, how this disease is spreading, it's certain behaviors that are more likely for you to be infected. And so that's what I was referring to when I said at high risk.
So are you really describing a social phenomenon, which communities this is currently spreading throughout, rather than activities that are happening, or kind of a combination of both?
I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'm going to need you to clarify that question.
Sure. It's really a question about, networks. We're seeing, it's like you said, early days. We're seeing growth in certain parts of the country, certain communities more than others, or is it?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. And so, right. Okay. So the majority of cases, the vast majority of cases are among, it's not gay and bisexual men, because that's a misnomer. That's about identity. It's really the more precise way to say it would be men who have sex with men. So yes, it is. It is the vast majority of cases are among that population. And as public health, we really have to strive to strike a balance between educating the public on risk, as well as preventing stigma. I think it is important for me to at least name that. But yes, to answer your question, it is in a very specific, the cases are largely among men who have sex with men.
And related to your previous point about that's where the vaccine is being targeted at this point, because there's limited quantity, right? To protect from further spread.
Yeah, so from a public health perspective, like everything, the framework for vaccine is, especially with COVID, is kind of distorted, I would say. So that the primary purpose of a vaccination is to limit spread of a disease in a community, and there's a lot of ways to do that. And so in some things like what would be a good example? MMR, it's elimination, right? Like, so we don't want a single case of measles. So it is recommended for everybody. In this instance, given our supply and given what we're seeing with this disease, it's largely around containment. So we want to interrupt chains of transmission. And so that's why our sort of vaccination strategy is two-pronged. It's close contact, so that if you have the illness, like someone that is lives in your house or is a partner, that way, if they don't get it, that is one less person to spread the disease, right? And then based on what we know about the epidemiology of the disease, we want to target those who are at highest risk of contracting it based on what we're seeing in the community right now. And so that, again, it's to interrupt those chains of transmission so that we can contain it. And early data from places like New York that have rolled it out a little ahead of us is very promising and very hopeful.
So with supply being limited and with certain populations being targeted for that supply, if you are a family that does not include men who have sex with men or would not be eligible for that supply today, what are some suggestions you might have for how we can help stop spread?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, I would say sort of like the biggest thing is like learning about what this is and how it spreads, and then where to get tested. So we've been asked recently to develop guidance for schools, and we are in the process of doing that. There's some fierce debate going on among my staff about what's the right way to say this. And so more than anything, I will say it's stuff that y'all know how to do already. It's if you're stay at home if you're sick, right? Which is schools know how to, your nurses know how to do that more than anything else. And hey, that'll help with COVID as well. And then a really good hand washing and hand hygiene is going to help. Also going to help with COVID. I'm going to keep saying that. And so a big question I get a lot is what kind of hand sanitizers, what kind of stuff. So like, hand sanitizer with an alcohol concentration greater than 60%, which is, pretty effective. Soap wise, the fancy hand soaps with that are more lotion than soap is not what you really want here. You want something with detergent in it, like, a good soap. And they're effective at preventing it. And then, regular sanitary stuff like clean and disinfect surfaces. Stuff that I hope that is already being done in most schools and classrooms and homes. And really, I even hesitate to say everything I just said, because it's really about understanding the risk right now. And the fact is, the risk is, from my perspective, minimal. And I want to make sure that all of y'all, as members of the public and as parents and administrators, have what you need, which is understanding what it is and how it spreads. And I do want to say, if somehow there is a case in someone who is at Maple Ridge High School, like, we would know pretty quickly. We would do a case investigation and contact tracing, make sure to offer vaccination to whomever that might want it, that we think meets the criteria. And again, we're getting pretty good at this. And the more experience we have with the illness. And I should also say that the one thing I didn't say was none of the cases are among school-age children thus far. Is that within the realm of possibility? Sure. Has it really happened yet on a widespread basis? No. And that kind of gives me some hope.
Thank you.
If we don't have additional questions, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Colancherry, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate the depth of information and how straightforward you've been in communicating it. And thank you for your support for MRH and the work that we're doing.
And thank you for having me. And Bonita has my information if you guys have any more questions. Thank you.
Great. We'll move on to item 4.02, our construction update. Is Randy joining us tonight, or Chris, will you be giving that?
Randy's joining us. I'm bringing him in now.
Great.
All right, as we bring Randy in, I want to start off by saying school will be ready to receive kids at the middle and high school. It is a very close timeline, and I'm appreciative of our partners of TRICO and also Randy with allowing me to infringe upon their meetings and get a better understanding of where we are, but it is very tight. The board is already aware of the approval of overtime. We engaged in a construction meeting today. We had construction walks, and the building will be ready to receive kids on the 23rd. Communication will be sent out to families regarding drop off, and we're adding signage from Ed in varying spots to ensure that the beginning of the school year, particularly at that campus, runs smoothly. And we are also partnering with our local police department to provide additional support to help with transportation. But it has been a heavy lift. I think I've talked a lot about the lift for our custodial staff and moving forward. We do have a plan to increase some communication pieces. So I was excited about our proactive approach to that. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Randy so he can give you the most up-to-date construction update.
Thank you. And I will echo what Dr. Jameson just said. First of all, thank you to Dr. Jameson herself, especially in the last few days, getting involved and quite literally getting down to the nitty gritty and going room to room alongside us, alongside the contractor, setting very clear expectations of where things need to be when staff arrive this week and then also when kids arrive next week. Also, a big thank you to Chris and to Taryn. Chris has obviously been involved in all of this work for quite some time, and Taryn came on board July 1, and Taryn's staff as well. I can't say enough about your building and grounds crew who are putting in a lot of overtime. Quite honestly, it's normal this time of year, and the ongoing construction just makes it even an even greater need in terms of overtime, in terms of flexibility, moving from one building to another, and quite honestly, fielding requests from all different directions. So they're handling it really well. And lastly, I want to make sure to point out your teaching staff and your principals have been very, very flexible. Some of your teachers came in and the classroom might not have been quite ready when they showed up yesterday, day before, whatever day it was. It might not have been quite ready, but they rolled with the punches. They've made it work, and principals have found alternate locations for meetings, whatever's need be. But again, big kudos to your staff. I won't go into a great deal beyond what Dr. Jameson said, other than these spaces are going to be ready. Now, when we say ready, that doesn't mean 100% complete. For example, there may be some areas in the cafeteria that will still be separated. They're still doing finish work, or it might be one of the meeting rooms off the cafeteria still receiving work. There might be some casework, shelving, whatever, in the library, for example, that isn't totally complete, but it won't prevent us from using those spaces and having those spaces available for kids when we come in when they come in on Tuesday. So that's good news. The last thing I would share, because we all want to see the pictures that Ed has for us. I will share with you that the payments we've made to our contractor now are about $10,246,000 and change. That's out of with the original contract and additions. The total amount is going to run just about 19.8. We've spent a little over 10.2 of that. So we've spent about over half, like 54.4% of the contracted amount. That's a reflection of the amount of work that has been completed. On the flip side, the available contingency funds, these are funds available through bond proceeds. We have actually obligated about 67.7% of those. So that's a little concerning to see that we've obligated a bigger portion of our available contingency funds than, say, the percentage of work we've completed. There should be a little discrepancy at this point. One, you spend some money on overtime at critical times to make sure rooms are ready and the building's ready for the start of school. So you get a little jump up in change orders this time of year. And also, we've been in the process of excavating for the big addition, the building A. And anytime you're digging in the ground, you find old foundations, you uncover old communication cables, you find unsuitable soil, you have to dig. You have greater expenses then. So we do need to watch it closely. I think those numbers will come closer in line in the next 6 months. But it is something I think we need to watch and be moderately concerned about. With that said, I think it's best if I just stop at this point and answer any specific questions anyone might have.
Randy, as we watch that variance between cost we've made and contingency available, is there a threshold that we really would need to be deeply concerned about that we're passing in terms of percentage of contingency used?
Yeah, I say if we get to the point that where we've used, say, 85% of our available contingency, and we still have a sizable amount of project to go, then I think we really need to discuss it. One of the things that I've done in past projects, for example, is decided to take something like furniture. We'll probably spend between $400,000 and $500,000 on furniture. And maybe it makes sense for a school district to purchase the furniture out of regular budgetary funds rather than bond proceeds. Right now, we are using bond proceeds for that. If we decided we wanted to make those expenditures out of the regular budget, obviously that would free up bond proceeds and grow your contingency. And that's just one example, something I've done when I've sat in Chris's chair in the past. There are a lot of ways, but to answer your question, I would say probably about January, we will have a pretty good idea of whether we need to whether there might be a need to supplement funds or not.
Thank you for keeping that item very close to the top of your report as we move forward.
Yeah, Dr. Jameson has made it very clear the two most important things are having the facilities open and ready for kids and cost.
Thank you for helping us be cautious stewards of our public money. If there aren't additional questions, we'll move on to 4.03, and Ed's got an update for us on construction progress.
Okay, I know most of you walked these spaces just 7 or 8 days ago, but there's been remarkable change since then. So let's get started in the Research and Design Center. Shot this just 6 hours ago. The cubbies are in, and what you're about to see, that's the wall where we watch the monitor for board meetings. Of course, it'll be used for learning as well. We are going to take a little quick spin through the maker space that is within the Research and Design Center. This is where there will be machinery for the kids to operate, to complete assignments, and there you go. It's protected by glass so they can be noisy in there while the Research and Design Center is quiet. Walking down through the classrooms in the middle school hallway, you can see that cabinets are going in, got the AV equipment. This is where the new lockers went in just late last week. Another classroom directly across from the lockers. Whiteboard is up, projectors up on the ceiling. Right outside that classroom, this is the ungendered restroom. The floor was being dried today. And the stalls are just about ready for the fixtures to go in, as you can see. Be 4 of them. Just wanted to show you some of the operational changes that are happening. This is the former high school math office, but it's now the headquarters for the tech department. It's Dr. Abby Irwin. So all the tech people are in one place where they should be. Daniel Clausen has nothing to do with Proposition E, but he and 2 buddies were getting laptops ready, and I couldn't help it. Throw them into the video. Those doors are not stacked against those lockers anymore, but they were a few days ago. Lots of doors needed up. We're moving on to the restroom off of the cafeteria now. Again, this is 4 days old, I think. It's come along pretty significantly since then. All right, I just walked through the door, the south-facing door from the cafeteria, and I know you walked this space, but I want to give our wider audience a look at the expanse of the cafeteria. Even with all that equipment in there, you can see just how much larger it is. Now we're stepping into what had been the existing space. And bear with me, it does not look like this today. We're coming up on what it looked like at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, but again, we're getting a scope. That's going to be the serving area, as it was. I still marvel at the old boiler room area. Look this way. As of today, they've got paint on the walls. It's starting to look bright. It's starting to look like a cafeteria. That's the exterior. And obviously, with all the progress, a lot of stuff is coming out of that building. This was also this afternoon. That's just one of several roll-off dumpster loads. There go those doors. So that's what I got this month.
Thanks, Ed. It's actually amazing to see the progress from when we were walking through last week. That's exciting to see.
Yep.
And can we confirm bathrooms that will be open at the start of school and which ones will not?
I can't.
Yeah, Chris, you can probably describe these better, but there's a restroom on what referred to as 3R and 4R. Those new restrooms just off the cafeteria, I believe those will be complete. Chris, you add to that?
Yeah, that's correct. The 3R and 4R, we've made the ends, the interior end of those restrooms. So both of those stacks will be ready. There's 8 additional stalls down in the cafeteria. And then the entire west side of the building from floors 1 through 4 will all still be available.
Right, because those will be renovated next summer.
Yes, and then about mid-September, the additional 4 restrooms on the east side of the building will be coming online.
Okay, so a little bit of a delay in those.
Early to mid-September. We're pushing.
And for our middle school families who are coming next Monday night to back to school night, will there be an opportunity for them to walk those spaces just to get their bearings?
Absolutely.
Great. Other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to 4.04, our school nutrition update with Taryn and Chris. Oh, Chris, you're muted.
I was just sort of rambling anyway. It's fine. I went to full screen and I lost my window. Panic moment. Okay, here we go. So as we've been talking for months, we are moving to Chartwells as our managed food service company. Chartwells was out here for opening day, and they brought in some staff and created a wonderful early lunch for us, and we were able to share that with our contractors and subcontractors. They were super thankful for that. They brought out their food truck and had that parked out by the theater, and they made street tacos, and this is just one of the menu items that will be available to our students in the coming weeks. And we are, as Chartwell spends more time engaging, they trained some of our staff today. They made pizza down in the high school, middle school kitchen, and it was fantastic. As the longer Chartwells is here, the more I realize that this is going to be a very good change for us. It's going to, I feel like our students are going to be excited about the menu items that they receive. I think the adults are going to be excited. There were rave reviews on the meals yesterday, and I went down and snuck a piece of pizza this afternoon, and it was fantastic. And more than anything, it was nice. It was absolutely wonderful to see the energy and the excitement in our food service workers that belong to MRH and how pleased they were. I came in near the tail end of that training. There was bright smiles on all their faces. One of the gentlemen looked at me and said, "Chris, we did this." And it was that type of enthusiasm was what we used to see in our kitchens pre-COVID. And it was exciting to see some of that and feel some of that come back. So I'm very excited about this move. So I'll quit talking about that and move on just to some of the nuts and bolts here. So Chartwells will be adding signage. They've got some themes that they've got planned, so that signage will be going up in the next couple of days. We did have a deep cleaning of the middle school, high school kitchen that happened on Monday. We brought in First On Site, who's the company that actually does our I guess, our water damage. Whenever we have a crisis at the school where something floods or whatever, First On Site is the company that comes in and mitigates that for us. They came in and I think they brought a crew of 12 in, and they spent just about 8 hours and cleaned the daylights out of that kitchen. I've never seen it. So they were vacuuming the ceiling. It was incredible. So that's all ready to go. And then we put up a plastic curtain to keep that construction dust off of that. So that all wasn't for naught. All the food has been ordered and delivered to all of the sites. So they're all ready to go there. They'll spend the next couple of days stocking the kitchens with the dry goods, paper goods, spices, knives, cut gloves, all of those types of things. Training began today and will continue through the first day of school. Then we start school. And we do have just a few MRH food service workers, but again, I am very hopeful that the excitement that I saw today will continue, and it will also spread out to our students and our staff as they enjoy these new menu items. Okay, so some questions, I just added this slide, some questions that we've been getting in recent days, and they are fair questions. I thought I'd just speak to publicly quickly. Breakfast will remain free for all students through this year through provision 2. So we're excited to be able to provide that for our students. It will be a regular traditional breakfast. We're not doing the grab and go take home breakfast anymore. We're back to pre-COVID in our cafeteria. So excellent there. This is our base year. So depending on the free and reduced lunch counts on this year will determine whether or not we're eligible for provision 2 in the coming years. School lunch prices are set at $3 currently. Reduced lunch price for those who qualify is 40 cents. And if you are an adult and would like to enjoy some of the menus, some of the meals created down there, that is $4. And I'm telling you what, it's a steal. There's nowhere you can get a $4 meal as good as what you're going to get down there. Lunch menus, I did have a link up here, but we've noticed that there are a couple of things that need to be cleaned up on those menus. The menu items themselves are accurate, but the buildings are misaligned with the grade levels. So the company is working on that, and we'll, by Friday, end of day tomorrow, we should have that published, and we'll make sure that Ed gets that out on the website so that everybody can go view their students' menus. That's just sort of a brief synopsis of what's been going on. Any questions?
Chris, can you remind us, My School Bucks will still be used for school lunch payments?
Yes, ma'am. My School Bucks is the preferred method. It keeps kids from having to remember to bring a check to school or getting lost in the bottom of the backpack. So yes, My School Bucks, and you can access that site by either going to myschoolbucks.com or through the food, I can't remember the name of the actual site, but through the school website in the lunch section.
However, I will remind folks that the school board several years ago committed to not deny children food for lack of current funds. So even if we don't get all the kinks worked out with how folks will pay for lunch, no child will be hungry on the first day of school or the first week or for the year.
It's been so long since we've collected money for lunch. Some of this is muscle memory is sort of fading, but you are right. We are not a cheese sandwich school district. We will not do that. We treat all of our students with dignity, but we do encourage our families to please, as often as possible, to pay for those meals, because that is a cost to the district, and those that remain unpaid do get dispersed or defrayed to the entire tax-paying population. So we do welcome those payments.
And so there is an opportunity for us to communicate what you've shared here through our individual building leaders, and also remind people that there is a free and reduced lunch application available online for them to fill out.
Yes,
so that we can collect as many of those as possible, which helps us better serve our students.
Indeed, yes.
And Mr. Riches and I are working on some district correspondence with this updated information about prices, links to My School Bucks, links to My School Apps, and links to the menus. In fact, it may or may not be happening as we speak.
I was about to say, be honest, Vince, we're texting each other right now.
Yeah.
Vince is helping us out as we are all incredibly busy, Vince and Ed as well, but they are helping craft that message for us.
Yeah. And we're going to
Thank
have hire someone part-time to help us get the applications entered into the system also.
Yeah, there's a lot of learning for us as we embark on this new journey with the food service management company, but I believe we've got a good angle on it, and we're going to be successful. So
Yeah,
Well,
I want to commend the team. I know, again, this wasn't necessarily the food service plan that we thought that the district was going to be engaging in 4 months ago. And so again, know that the timeline has been very tight because we needed DESE approval and we needed school board approval. And so the fact that this has all come together in 7 weeks is quite remarkable. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Taryn. And please, extend our thanks to the Chartwell's team as well. Again, I know that ideally, we would maybe like to have this all sorted out, more than a few days before school starts, but I think folks will ultimately be really pleased with how this is going to roll forward.
thanks, Katie. They will be pleased.
Yeah, I will echo that. And we appreciate families extending us our metaphor of grace and gratitude as we move through this, because with these construction challenges and this food service management company transition, it's been a lot. But we're getting there, and the payoff will be significant. So thank you. All right. We'll go ahead and move on to 4.05. We have our Discover Club update with Dr. Bouchard. There you are.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for adding us back to your agenda this evening. If you'll bear with me a moment, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. All right, so we just wanted to give a Discover Club update. I did want to start off by first, gratitude does not begin to describe what Dr. Ambrose Phillips and Dr. Jameson deserve for helping navigate through this Discover Club process and helping us look for some outside resources as well to support this program. And then that goes without saying, if you don't know Betty Pearson, her work with the Discover Club, her dedication to the district and to this program is just beyond phenomenal. The whole reason this is happening at such a level is because of her dedication and her tenacity to support the kids in this before and after care program. So we just wanted to kind of give an overview where we were. Feels like an eternity ago, but I think it was only maybe 6 weeks ago. So we were looking at 225 applications that families had submitted in order to have before and after care, and really just staffing for 36 students, and the beginnings of a partnership with the YMCA at the elementary school. Since then, we have continued to seek out additional staffing services. We currently have 2 AM Discover Club workers. We have 2.4 PM MRH Discover Club workers that have been committed. We have 3 staff members that are temporary, sort of a Band-Aid, helping out staff members that have been willing to step up and help out Discover Club. Kelly Services has committed to 2.6 staff members. And we have 3+ applicants now as of today in process, and we'll be making some recommendations to some of those folks this evening to the board, I believe. Also super helpful, the families have been really letting us know that, hey, if we can just get 3 days a week, that would be very helpful. And so that has helped open up spots for families, as well as try to get as many kiddos and families services that can do that. We have contacted Complete Harmony and our partnership with YMCA for future use. They are not at this time able to assist with childcare, but we have contacted them, and so we're developing some partnerships with those groups as well to look for future opportunities to help families seek out opportunities and services. Our current enrollment numbers, I am happy to report. I'm going to start with the elementary. The YMCA, the Y Club Care, Shelly at the Y Club has been phenomenal also to work with. She is set up and ready to go. Every family on that waiting list has been contacted and given an opportunity to enroll in Y Care. And it's also actually even been opened up to a few more families that contacted outside of us about the original wait list when some families either moved or said they didn't, need the care. So we currently have 44 kids enrolled at the elementary level, and they are set up to go and continuing to monitor the program over at the elementary. At the ECC, we have now been able to enroll 133 students. So we went from 32 to 133. So that's amazing. We currently only have about 11 kids, pre-K students on the wait list. And as we continue to get applicants and look at staffing, we will continue to try to open up those spots as soon as we get confirmation that that staffing is pretty solid, and that we have confirmation that we will have staffs for that. We do have some students, originally, I apologize, I did not update the slide correctly, but originally we did have some students that were in AM care only, and we're still waiting for PM care, but I believe that as of late yesterday afternoon, that everybody that needed the PM care and the AM care were in both AM and PM. So we had spots for all of those families. So all of the K-1-2 students at the Early Childhood Center have been placed into the program, as well as the 11 kids that are still just on the waiting list for early childhood. So we feel really great about this. We know we're not done yet. We want to let families know we are not done looking for staffing. We will continue to kind of pound the streets and looking for solutions, and make sure that families try to get the care that they need. What we wanted to talk a little bit about too is looking forward, that we are continuing to recruit, retain, and partner for staffing solutions. Dr. Loyette and I have had many discussions and trying to look at the outside resources that are available to families and helping develop that more inclusive list of resources for families so that they have options and they can really make the best decisions for their family as a whole. Whether, we believe, Maple Richmond Heights is the best place for their kids, but there may have some other needs that work out better someplace else. So trying to give, a really complete picture of the community and what's available in the community and or the nearby community, I think would be helpful for parents and knowing what to go look for. We are looking, as Dr. Ambers Phillips had said, we are looking to increase the pay to $15 per hour. One of the major changes that Betty and I have discussed is really starting that enrollment process for parents earlier. I think that's just, from a staffing standpoint, it just really makes sense to try to figure out what the need is earlier in the year, and be able to try to help recruit some of those staff members much earlier than we have recently. Review and revise the enrollment process, really looking to, and really the next bullet point, reviewing accessibility, equity, and the needs of families. Looking to really engage the families, especially the families using the service, as well as some of the community members, on what the needs are and how accessible they feel like it is. I think we can really simplify the process for families and give a little bit more information. We heard a lot of great feedback. I mean, what wonderful families, exist in this district, because while they are super stressed and panicked, they're still shouting out ideas and options and, and helping us try to, manage this process better. So just giving them, getting some of that feedback from them has been wonderful to help us revise some of these enrollment process. So we're really looking to engage a group of stakeholders as we go through the handbook and make some updates and really outline the process for families so that they have specific steps for what they have to do to enroll, and they, it's very clear on, what the process is for everyone, and to simplify the process. Like I said, explicitly communicating those processes in the handbook. And then the final goal, I think, for this program is really to continuously review the Discover Club fees, the sliding fees for families, the needs that families have, and the budget, and how that impacts, the dollars that we spend, and how we can continue to support the program in the district. I will open it up for any questions at this time.
Dr. Burchard, I just want to start by expressing my gratitude for the work that you've done. You are new to our district. You came into a very stressful situation, and you identified what needed to be done to move forward. And partnering with Betty and our families, you've covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. And I want to just acknowledge that nobody likes to start a new job in a circumstance where families are in distress. But we thank you for all that you've done and the professionalism with which you've approached it. We recognize we have a lot of work to do. And you've outlined how we're going to do it, and I really appreciate that. Something I also want to acknowledge is that we as a community have long struggled with staffing for Discover Club and finding adequate space for our families. That has certainly been a circumstance since my family has been in the district. It was extremely acute this year, and I want to recognize that the plan you've laid out is going to help us address meeting some of those acute needs. That being said, we do have some temporary positions filled for a short period of time. And so we're going to need to continue to revisit this. I want to understand from you when you think it makes sense for us to check back in with you through this process in the coming school year to kind of assess progress on these goals and where we might lend additional resources to supporting your work.
Sure. I do want to, and I also want to, iterate. I know this is probably goes without saying, but this is an issue that is, stressed families and school districts across the board, across the state. The development of the Office of Childhood that is overseeing the licensing, the accreditation of the childcare programs and the before and after school programs and the processes. The state is working really hard to help simplify for schools, especially, and for some of the childcare facilities, some of those processes. And so I think that there are definitely some exciting things in the future. I think probably in answer to your question, we're probably looking at maybe October, November to revisit some of these things, giving us an opportunity to kind of get things started and rolling and really look at starting to engage some of the families in some of the processes and just continuing to move forward with, recommendations that we have going forward with Discover Club. So I would expect probably October, November-ish would be a good time to come back and talk about where we are with the process. And then probably, budget time, I think, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's usually January land. So anywhere in the neighborhood of December, January, starting to continue to revisit the impact of the $15 per hour. Are we seeing increases of applicants and things like that, and just revising where we're at with staffing and all of these issues.
Great. Yeah, I think we really will want to see the impact of the pay increase and what that will look like going forward.
I heard a lot of shout outs across the board. I would echo all of those. Yes. I also want to make sure that we explicitly say thank you to the staff that stepped up temporarily to fill those spots.
Absolutely. A huge
and all everybody else, the Discover Club workers, all of them who stayed.
Yep, absolutely. The staff stepping up has been phenomenal. We wouldn't be able to enroll as many kids without, the willing staff members to step in and help stopgap some of the holes. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Burchard. If there are no more questions, we'll move on to new staff orientation evaluation by Dr. McGee.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody tonight. I have two quick documents I'm going to refer to just to give you a quick update on our new staff orientation. We had about 34 new staff from both our rankings, but also in the special school district participate in new staff orientation. So what you see on your screen is what I affectionately refer to as the grid. which was sort of the pretty view of what are all the things that we did, who was involved, and then where were there opportunities to intersect. So this is probably a first time that we're bringing in opportunities for not only administrators, but certified staff as well as classified staff to interact as a part of being considered new staff and going through an official formal orientation. So this kind of gives you an overview of what was done on each of those days. A lot of the planning came from the document that was referred to as the PD plan, which I linked in the update for this agenda, as well as looking through some archive documents to try and figure out what has been done historically in order to make sure that we can not only provide that service as well as look for opportunities to provide new value. The second document, or sorry, the third document that I provided was an overview of the evaluation. This was late getting to you because of the fact that the survey just closed a couple days ago. So if you did not have time to read all 5 pages of size 8 font, that makes perfect sense. And I would be impressed if you had time to get it all done. But I did want to specifically highlight the sort of the overall evaluation, the analysis and conclusion, as well as our proposed goals for next year. So first of all, people overwhelmingly felt welcome, which was really the first piece of the puzzle that made me feel that we knocked it out of the park. Number 2, they did have all the tools and logistics that they needed to get day 1 started, as well as they understood the theory and the history, which was really important for me to make sure that we honor the multiple decades of work that have gone into making MRH what it is. And then our proposed goals moving ahead will just be partnering with various departments, working closer so that way we're not spinning up a lot of these things over the July and August timeframe, but looking to start earlier in January, building some of the infrastructure so that way we're ready to deploy this even more seamlessly for the future. I did refer to a phrase called the learning team in this, and that's just basically everyone who is encompassed within my Department of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, which includes our Federal Programs Coordinator, our Data and Assessment Accountability, Technology, and I'm certainly going to MTSS Coordinator. I'm going to forget people, but in the pressure of the moment. But that was all of us coming together to plan these events. So I'll pause there and see if there are any other questions.
We appreciate you soliciting this feedback. It was actually very helpful for us to have access to. I did read the whole thing in spite of the 8-point type. So it's actionable data and we appreciate it. If no questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our strategic plan update. Thanks, Dr. McCreary.
Awesome. Not a lot to update. We are looking at identification of individuals for our steering committee, and we have established a date for the board special session to begin to discuss core values, mission, vision, and that is slated for September 10th. And so that's the update that we have at this moment, but I'm excited about the work, and the information has been shared district-wide as we talked about what our foci will be for the upcoming school year. Are there any questions about strategic planning update?
We're excited to get started.
Dr. McGee, am I missing anything?
No, we're excited to gather on September 10th. We're currently planning to be at the CIC at CET, which is down close to IKEA. So plan to get your shopping in after we do some core values work.
Great alignment. Thank you. Chris, we'll move on to our finance update.
Okay, well, July is probably the least interesting month when it comes to financial statements. There really just isn't a whole lot going on. We've just flipped the budget year to fiscal 23, and we've really not gotten any revenues as of yet. So draw your attention to just a couple of things here. Oh, I'm not actually sharing, am I? Oh yeah, I am. I've lost control. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. There we go. Now it's working. Sorry about that. Okay. So I always like to point out this slide, 86% of our revenue is from our local sources. So you can see here, there's really over here on the year-to-date column, that's what's happened through July. There really isn't much going on at all, but we are in line with prior years. A quick scan of these lower numbers here, and you can see that things are tracking relatively close to what they have in the prior years. We get to the expenses and the same. So we would expect some of our expenses to be a little bit higher at this point in the year. As we are coming out of COVID, we are purchasing some additional things out of the operating budget for the construction projects like displays and some technology items. So some of these expenses are absolutely expected and have not been present in prior years. However, we still are on track on the budget. As a whole, 3.7%. So we are about 1.5% or so higher than we have been in the prior 2 years as we're coming out of this pandemic. I'm going to skip through the expenses to the bottom line here. That's the one that you wish I would just start with. So I will show you here that we did end fiscal 22 strong. We are projecting right now a budgeted fund balance as a percentage of expenditures of 40.8%. We will probably be bringing you a budget amendment in the coming months as we adjust for our title revenues and title expenses. Those are yet to be included in the budget, and we'll be putting those in, and we always like to get those reflected in the actual numbers as soon as possible. Any questions? Okay.
No questions? All right. Thanks, Chris. We'll go ahead and move on to calendar of events. As a reminder for our work session on September 1st, I know you're all feverishly reading the governance core. Please read the introduction and chapter 1 and have your comments in Dr. Jameson's Padlet before we meet. And then, as Chris mentioned, we've got our strategic plan working session on September 10th. That's from 8:30 to 1 p.m., I believe. So a good full morning of kickoff on that. For our board committees, we have a draft proposal for committee assignments. I hope you have all had an opportunity to take a look at that. This is our recommendation from Dr. Jameson in collaboration with Brandy and myself, but certainly we can make adjustments. There we go. Thanks, Dr. J. We have an opportunity to make adjustments if anybody has strong feelings about how those assignments were made. We have some foundational work to do on our legislative advocacy committee. So I'm forcing our current and most recent former president into that space with me so that we can bring some insight to that process. But do we have questions or discussion about the proposal? Everybody's completely satisfied? All right. We got a lot of work to do, but we've got a lot of strong people to do it. So let's move on to our action items. We ready to vote? Can I get a motion on construction change orders?
Move to approve change order number 20 is presented.
Thank you, Rachel.
Second.
Thank you, Annie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.02, COVID mitigation measures.
I move to approve the MRH return to learn plan and reapprove the MRH universal mitigation measures as presented this evening.
Thank you, Katie.
Second.
Thank you, Linda. Oh, Annie. Rachel.
Melinda.
Take your pick. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Board policy BBFA, which we reviewed at our last meeting.
Move to readopt board policy BBFA as presented in order to remain in compliance with the Missouri Ethics Commission.
Thank you, Annie.
Second.
Thank you, Rachel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 7.04 support staff salary increase.
Move to improve the increase of support staff starting wages to $15.
Thank you, Rachel.
Second.
Thank you, Katie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Kelly Services clerical staff salary increase.
Move to approve the 2022-2023 Kelly Services rate increase to $12 an hour as presented.
Thank you, Rachel.
Second.
Thank you, Linda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, who would like to take us into executive session?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with the section 610.021, subsections 1, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised status of Missouri on August 18, 2022 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters and legal matters.
Thank you, Linda. We'll take a roll call vote. Rachel?
Actually, we need a second, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll do a roll call vote. Rachel?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
And Amber says yes too. Motion carries. All right, do we have a separate link for executive session?
Yes, within board docs.
Okay, see you all in a minute. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks
Good
to all
night.
our guests too.
Good night.